Well, hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. This is Patrick at Qdabra, and today we're talking about how to customize your lists using InfoPath. First off, I'd like to quickly just go over the agenda. The agenda today is we're talking about how to customize data in multiple lists, create forms that can edit the data. We'll show you how to create a dashboard. I'll show you how to create forms that allow you to edit the children as well as the parent and show details for both. I'll talk about some other techniques. First, before we get started, I want to do a quick question to you. We have a poll, a very short poll, a one-question poll, and I'd just like to get a little bit of input and see where you're coming from today. This question is regarding how you're using data today in InfoPath and SharePoint. How do you build solutions today for your data, your business processes, collecting data? So we'll give it a few more seconds here. We've got about 40% of you voted, and most of you are saying you use InfoPath, which is no surprises there. We've got about 15% using the SharePoint Designer, and a few more seconds here, and then you've got a couple people doing the developer, hiring a developer. So great, it's great to have your quick feedback there. It looks like most of you are using InfoPath. You came to the right place today. We're going to talk about InfoPath and lists. So why are we doing this webinar today? Well, when we're collecting data for business processes, we're all about automating our business processes today and making our processes run more smoothly. We need to collect data, and data is often relational. What do I mean by that? You have repeating data. So if you look at most of your forms out there today, think about a form, a paper form in the past being a business process on paper. The paper form, if it has like multiple items on it, like for example, if you have an invoice request, you might have multiple line items. If you have a timesheet, you have multiple line items. If you have a leave request, you might take multiple days off. All of those multiple things are many items. They're repeating data. And you can actually use SharePoint to manage that data because each SharePoint list serves, it functions as a table does in a relational database. So SharePoint is actually stored in a SharePoint SQL database in the back end. It's using a SQL database to store the table data. And you can use those lists to create a very small relational database for your data. The challenge is how do we edit the data in those multiple lists? Because most of the time you're going to have a parent list and a child list, and you might have a grandchild list. You'll have lookups. So it's easy to get the data out of the parents. I'm going to talk about some examples and show some demos here in a second. But let's say, for example, that you've got an expense report and you need to look up expenses that you have filed in the past. You want to edit the data. That would be a lookup. If you're looking up a cost center, that would be a lookup, right? That's easy to do in SharePoint using a lookup field. You can also use a drop-down in InfoPath. Adding data, multiple data, in the child is not too bad. You can do that with creating a list form that adds repeating data. But editing can be a bit tricky if you're editing multiple sets of data. So we'll talk about a few ways we do that today. But there's really 4 different techniques for updating that child data. First of all, you can use a list in the edit mode. Let's take a look at that. So here is my list. I've got 2 things. We demo the expense report a lot here. So I have these 2 lists right here. I have the expense reports, 3 expenses so far, and I have items. So just created these 2 lists for this webinar. Now I can go in here and I can actually go to the list and edit it just using the out-of-box SharePoint view. Don?
The view isn't updating, Patrick.
Okay.
The view isn't updating. There we go.
Okay, I'll go slow. Thanks for the feedback. So where are we at?
Okay, I can see SharePoint now.
Great. It may be slow for you, but not slow for others, Don. So if people are having problems, please do chat me so I can slow down. and just add a note there, and I'll know. Let's do a quick show of hands to see whether people saw that slowdown. If you saw the slowdown that Don mentioned, please raise your hand. I'll give you an idea. I am off-site today, so I'm a bit, we have a very fast bandwidth connection, so it looks like other people did not see that problem, Don, so maybe it's just you. Okay, so anyway, here is my SharePoint list, and what I want to do is I want to just go in here and just edit it. So I can actually go in here, I can filter it out and say, well, I went to Zurich, and I can actually go in here and edit this data, right? So you can actually filter your child data based on your parent data. This is a lookup, right? And you can edit it just fine, right? So that works well. I can't customize this view to show a subtotal or to do any kind of validation, but this is pretty nice. I mean, it's not too bad, right? So that's one way you can do it. You can actually just use the out-of-box edit mode in the list. And you can have two lists that are connected using a lookup. Easy to do. Once again, it doesn't have custom formatting. You can't, if I have to delete something, I have to actually click it here and right-click it and delete it. So it's a couple of different steps. Like I said, you don't have that nice ability to see details on the parent information because you can't customize it. You just get the child data, right? Okay, so let's talk about another technique. So we can customize the lists using InfoPath. So if we go back to the ribbon 2013, you see that we have customized InfoPath here, customized form. So when I click on this, it's going to open up InfoPath and allow me to customize the site. So I think let's just do this. Now, why would I want to customize it with InfoPath? Well, I'll mention the reasons in a second, but in general, it's because you get a nice design surface, a WYSIWYG editor. So here's our form, and if I go back to the site, I've already done this, right, as you can see. If I click on New Item here, it'll give me that nicer view. So I can sort my trips here. It pulls in information about the expense. It allows me to edit the data, so I can say Delta Airlines here. It's updating it as I type. I can delete one of these items. I can delete the train trip here. That's a one-click operation, hopefully. There we go. And I can add a new item. I can say, well, let's say I want to, what do I want to do here? I want to take Uber, let's say, instead of, well, I got the taxi up above. So let's say that on my trip to Zurich, what did I do? I took the bus. Okay, so City Transit, I'm just tabbing over, and the bus was 12 euros. We'll just call it dollars for now. And you can see it's updating that subtotal at the bottom. So this is pretty nice. I've got a one-click new, I've got a one-click delete, and I can sort on these items. I can go to my other report. I can look at that and get some KitKats for one of our employees here. I can go back to my Zurich trip and see that it is keeping the data that I added. And if I close this, you'll see that the list is updated, and those items from Zurich, which are filtered still, I've got that new item there. So that's a really nice experience. It allows me to quickly add items. It provides a nice UI. I can customize it, make it show validation, and so on. So let's talk a little bit more about this. So the benefit of customizing the list with InfoPath is, once again, it's out of box. There's nothing external required. And you can do the custom formatting. You can have the one-click new, the one-click delete. There's some setup required. List forms, which is what this is, are not easy to move from site to site. If you create your SharePoint template, it will not allow you to move it to another site with an InfoPath form attached to it, unfortunately. So we have a document that will send you some configuration documents, a step-by-step guide that we put together to make it easy for people, because I'm going to show you how I did this. There are some tricks. So here's the form. Now with the list form, when you open it up, most of the time you'll see this very basic data source view on the right. If you look at the advanced view, you can see that I've got lots of different data connections. Now, one of the key tricks here is that I'm actually pulling in the expenses and actually putting that into a secondary data source. So this item here, where you see all my expenses, that's actually not the main data source, right? Because if you just create a list form, it won't allow you to edit multiple items. So we have to be a little clever here. And the way we do this is we actually map we create a data connection that points at the expenses, and then we query it, and we pull all of the data for the expenses that match that report into this secondary data source. And then if we edit this data, so we can actually edit the data here, we have rules that actually then copy the data to the main data source, which allows us to then submit it and update the data. So this gets around the problem of having to edit multiple list items in InfoPath with a list form. And it's very clever the way we did this. It took us a long time. We actually did the same webinar in September 11th, not a great date, 2014. We didn't have it completely working. We had a problem with the new button, but we've since fixed that. You can see here the new button is one of these very special buttons for list forms and database forms in InfoPath. This new button actually has it's special. So what I mean by special means that there's a new record action for it. So it actually will automatically create a new record, and when we do that, it'll insert it into the list and copy it out so that we can edit it. So it actually inserts it and then re-queries the list and allows us to edit it. So that's actually pretty tricky too. Let's go back to our slides. So there's a couple other techniques you can do to map repeating data to a list, to a child list, and have this solution, this parent-child solution where you have master detail information. We've talked a lot in the past about using QRules submit to SharePoint list command. Lately, we've actually been downplaying this a bit because Microsoft has changed the performance of the sandbox in the cloud. It's still very nice on the SharePoint services on-premise, but on 365 it's gotten slower. It's 2 to 3 seconds to open a form versus half a second or faster before. So we're downplaying this as a solution. It is more flexible and has a smoother display, but because of the sandbox requirement, we are suggesting that you look at the customized list using the InfoPath today and this clever techniques that we've figured out how to do this. The other technique is use Camel, and this is a little bit tricky. I don't recommend this, but you can do it with Camel, but Camel is called Collaborative Application Markup Language. This is a SharePoint language used to update lists. And it's a bit old, and it's very hard to maintain, and it's so let's take a look. I showed you how to filter and edit it using the default view. We can customize the list using InfoPath, obviously, and I've demoed this. Let me show you one more thing. I've also talked about tricks as well. We're using secondary data source to show the filtered items. We're querying the main data source. In fact, let me go back to the form and show you that when we change any of these values, what do? We set the ID, query it, copy the data to the main data source, and then submit it because we've made a change, right? So we're actually using the secondary data source as our form to edit the data, but whenever it changes, we go ahead and copy it to the main data source and then submit it, and that way we can use the stock list submit command to update the data, as you saw in the demo previously. So those are some of the key techniques. For the deleted stuff, what's actually interesting about delete is I'm not actually deleting anything. I'm just marking as deleted and then hiding it from the view and hiding it from the SharePoint view. And this is actually in some ways a best practice because sometimes you don't want to necessarily delete data for auditing purposes. You want to keep it there, but just mark it as deleted. Of course, we could have a workflow that fires that really does delete it, right? Because when we click on delete, it's going to submit it with the delete flag set to yes, and we could have a workflow that then really deletes it. But in this case, I'm actually just leaving it in the list. And if I go to the list, you can see that if I change the view, if I modify my view to remove that filter, I've got a filter here that says, only show the items where delete is not equal to yes. And if I change that, if I just remove it, you'll see that deleted item, I think it was the train trip, you can see that the train trip is now showing up again right there, even though it's deleted. And if I add a row for the deleted columns, you'll see all the ones that have been deleted as well. So that's another trick that we're using. And then talked about the new button. We have a special field to connect the web part. So let me show you the web part demo next. That's my final demo for today. We have another technique to edit this data, and we're using it out of box. What am I doing here? I already have the link. We're using the out of box web part page, and on top what you see is you see the parent data from my expense report list on the left. And of course I can add a new expense report here, let's see here, let's just say webinar, and then if I select this, I don't have any data down below for it, so I'll add a new item to it, and we'll just say goodies for the attendees, chocolate. And we'll send you lots of French chocolate today. Okay, and then if I change to select the Zurich trip one, it refreshes correctly, noticing that it's not showing that train that I deleted, but it is showing the bus that I added. And I can go back to the webinar one, and you can see that one item I entered. And of course I can close these and go back to my actual list on the left, and you can see there's the chocolate. Now let's go back to the webinar page, the web part page, and let's take a look at how I did this. So this is just out of the box stuff, and what you do is you go into the page and you of course edit the page. So you have to go to Site Pages, add a new page, and you're going to insert the web parts for InfoPath here and then configure them. And if we look at this web part on top, it's pointing to the expense reports list, which is also using InfoPath to modify the list form. And the one on bottom is pointing to the expense items, which you saw earlier. So if I go in here, what you want to do is you want to connect them. So when I change the one on top, it's going to send the data to the one on the bottom, right? Now what I've done is I've actually removed the names of these things and replaced it with spaces to try to make the web part page look a little bit better. I could have gone into SharePoint Designer and modified it too. But trust me, it is sending it to this child. And when you click on this, it's going to give you the option to map it to a field in the child form. And we're mapping it to web part report. So let's take a look at the this form here. This is the parent, right? This is the number of expense reports I have. So if I customize this form in InfoPath, you'll see that when I click on the select button, there's a rule that sends the data to the web part. So if we look at our rules, we have, when I click on select, it sets the ID and it sends the data to the web part. So this is a command in InfoPath that allows you to communicate between these two web parts. So by selecting this, it actually sets the row ID equal to ID, and then it actually gets copied to the child as the web part report, or the web part, whatever it is, the report ID or whatever it is. And the report ID then, if we go back to the child, there's a I need to go to the data fields here, because it gets copied over here as web part report. And then when this changes, what I do is I just requery. So I set the report information here, and that is actually driving my query. So the report, when I change the report in the query, it will rerun the query, requerying the items. So that's how I connected them. So you go into the web parts, you connect them, and then one of the forms has to send the data to the other one, and when the other one gets the data, it has to actually do something like requery. So that's how we connect these things. It's pretty easy to do. So once again, let's just take a quick look at that. So once again, I can click select, and it will highlight the row and show me the items here. I can delete the items down below, change my selection, go back, and lo and behold, they're deleted. So it's, obviously there is a little bit of a problem here, and that is this refresh. As you can see, when I click on select, it is doing this refresh. It's refreshing the entire page. So that's one of the issues with the web part technique. But in general, it's okay. It works fine, and it's totally out of the box. So why are we suggesting that you look at using InfoPath to customize your list forms today? Number one, you can use InfoPath to basically maintain data in separate lists, multiple lists that are connected using a lookup. Microsoft has extended the support for InfoPath until 2026. They just shipped SharePoint Server 2016, and they're shipping SharePoint Designer 2013 and InfoPath Designer 2013 separately. So you still have to use those tools to modify the forms in SharePoint. Because Microsoft included InfoPath Form Services again in SharePoint 2016, they've recommitted to supporting it for 10 years. That's their software assurance. They're using InfoPath Form Services internally to help people edit workflows, but the good news for you is that you've got that support now for another 10 years, and they extended it 2 years. The previous date was 2024, based on the 2013 plus 10. Now it's 2026. So you've got the WYSIWYG Designer. That's a rich designer in InfoPath Designer 2013. You do have to install it separately with 2016, but it comes as part of SharePoint 2013. SharePoint Designer 2013 was previously could let you do a WYSIWYG design of these data web parts, but you can't do that anymore with SharePoint Designer. So InfoPath Designer is really what you have left in terms of rich design experience. So it's easy to customize the experience, the appearance of the forms. You saw that I've colored in the rows for the parent, and you can do other things. You can highlight the data, you can make it bold, you can hide and show it, and it's easy to add rules to do extended things. So this is kind of what I showed with the web part thing, and that was my demo. A couple disclaimers. Number one, list forms, like I said earlier, they're very hard to reuse. So you really have to create them from scratch. But once you get the hang of it, it's not too hard. It does require a little bit of configuration though. And if you have large data sets, if you have more than 5,000 items, you will want to move that data to Azure. We've talked about how to bridge, how to query Azure and use a database stored in Azure with your 365 forms. Same with SharePoint on-prem. And that's pretty much it. I've got time for questions, a few minutes here. Next week, we're going to start a 10-part series on how to build form solutions. So we're trying to be agnostic. We've looked at lots of form technologies. We still think InfoPath is the best solution out there for many reasons. We'll be talking about that starting next week, but we'll also be showing you how to build forms kind of independent of we'll be using InfoPath as an example or as our demo, but we'll be showing you how we build forms. And we've built forms using a lot of different technologies over the years. We still love InfoPath, and questions for me. So it looks like Shane's got a question. If I have Office 365 Pro Plus with 2016 apps, I can still install IP 2013? Question mark. Yes. When I upgraded from 2013 apps to 2016 apps, it uninstalled IP 2013, right, and reverted to IP 2010. That made it impossible to edit 2013 forms in Designer. Yes, so what you want to do is just reinstall 2013 from the Microsoft MSDN site. And they do have a site where you can do that. You can use I believe you can use the same codes for 365 to install 2013. But Microsoft has actually put a page out on that. I didn't prepare a link to that site. We've talked about it in the past, and I can get that information for you, Shane. That's an interesting question. Thank you for asking it. Michael's got the next question. I have an InfoPath 2010 form for SharePoint 2010 list. What happens if my IT department decides to move it to SharePoint 2013? Will my IP form still work? That's a good question. The list will move, and the form should move as well. It depends on what they're using to migrate it. We do a lot of SharePoint migrations, and we use tools that allow you to migrate the templates over. The SharePoint, the InfoPath form can also be saved out externally, so you can actually go in to the designer, and you can save it, file save as, save it locally, right? And then as long as your site doesn't change, you can reopen it and point it to the new site and republish it, and that should work fine for you. It will recreate the columns if they're different. But in general, very difficult to move list forms. That's one of the issues that we have with them. Yeah, so I guess that's it. Any other questions for me? We're had quite a few people here today. I'm glad to see everyone. We'll make this webinar available. We've got, like I said, this document. Let me just show you quickly. We've got a nice document that Don prepared to walk you through how to configure your form, so you can basically create a form that edits list data like you saw I was doing, and it's a list form, so it's very simple out of the box. Here's the document. It's a 15-pager, not a huge document, a lot of screenshots. We'll send you this if you fill out our 4-question survey, very simple survey questions, and then of course we can help you if you run into any issues. We've had quite a few people lately looking for this kind of solution, and so we decided to do it this week, and it's great to see how many people showed up for this webinar. Appreciate your one more question here, I guess, from Mark. Mark, great to see you. I'm a rookie in the IP world. Can you show how to add a section to the child section below the table of rows? Okay, that's a great question. So I'm assuming you mean here in the expense items form. So you want to know how to add, let me see if I can get your question open again here. Can you show me how to add a section to the child section below the table of rows? So we've got this is the table of rows, and so to add a section down here, you just put your cursor in here, and you would, of course, add it there, right? So you, of course, depending on what you want to show, you would put the section in here. Now, if you want to add a section, like let's say you wanted to show some details, what I would suggest you do is put it inside of the table. So in other words, create a row underneath this where you show the details of something. But you can also bind anything here. So you can create a section for anything. Even the title, for example, could have a section. And the way we do that is we go into the data source, we click on More, and then you choose Section with or without controls, and then it adds it to your form like that. So it's relatively easy to do. You have to be careful a little bit when you're adding sections, because if you bind things incorrectly, it won't show things. Now this form also is kind of interesting because we don't show everything if it's in the web part view. So we have a special flip, a trigger that says if we're in the web part view, hide this extra section up on top, right? Hide these sections if we're in the web part mode, and we hide the close button as well. And the way we do that is we use a secondary data source called the web part, which I just created from scratch. A web part has one field in it, and the web part field is report ID. We set that on load, and then if the web part actually connects to it, it sets it something else, and then we use the fact that it's setting it something else to hide that data. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question, Mark. It's great to have you here. I guess that's it. I hope you guys all have a great day. It's been a pleasure presenting to you. We'll do it again next week, and look forward to having you here at that time as well. Have a great day.